Hello and welcome. Professor Arnie Hill is my name, and we're back with the third and final episode of So You Want to Be a Doctor. Tonight, we want you to keep on sending in your questions. We want you to enjoy the programme. Later on, we're going to take your questions on the live feed. I've got my colleague here, Celeste Golden from the Admissions Office in RCSI, and we're going to try and address all your questions. So enjoy the programme. Back in 15 minutes. So hello and welcome to the third and final episode of So You Want to Be a Doctor. This is the show that tells you what it's like to be a healthcare professional working in a hospital or in primary care as a doctor. My name is Professor Arnie Hill. I'm head of the School of Medicine at RCSI here in Dublin. And tonight we'll be introducing you to not 3 doctors, but 4 doctors who will share their experience of what it's like to be working as a doctor here in Ireland. Remember, send your questions in to us during the programme. Contact us at #RCSIBeaDoc via Twitter or Facebook, or email us at the address on the screen. Now let's go to our first doctor, Dr. Susan Smith. I'm sure you've been sick on a few occasions throughout your life, and your mum or your dad has brought you to the doctor. Well, that first doctor that you meet is a general practitioner. Let's go and see what Susan does on a daily basis.
My name is Susan Smith. I'm a general practitioner or a family doctor, and I also work in RCSI as the Professor of Primary Care Medicine in the Department of General Practice. I think most of you will be familiar with the GP being maybe the family doctor that you were taken to when you were children and you had anything wrong with you. We come in all shapes and sizes. There's young GPs, old GPs, men, women. Most of us now work in small group practices, so there's 4 GPs working alongside me in the practice here, but some GPs still work on their own. The advantage for GPs working on their own is that they really do know their own patients very well, but if you work in a group practice you get to have more of a team working kind of situation. On average we might see maybe 15 booked in patients in a morning and then maybe 5 or 6 emergency patients on top of that. It will involve a mixture of small children with temperatures and coughs. The next person in could be an elderly person who needs a blood pressure check. Then you might get someone in who's feeling depressed or very low in their mood. In this practice we specialise in addiction management, so we would have quite a few patients who are on methadone maintenance for being addicted to drugs like heroin. So really it's a huge range of different things, and one of the great things about general practice is you actually don't know what's coming in the door. Then the other side of our job is increasingly GPs manage chronic illness. So that's when someone has a lifelong condition, for example, something like diabetes or asthma. So now GPs will be very involved in managing those patients. The rest of my job involves working as the Professor of Primary Care Medicine in RCSI's Department of General Practice. We have a fantastic department. It's very vibrant and active. We teach undergraduate medical students, so I'm responsible for the first and second years learning their clinical skills as doctors. So we meet students as soon as they start medicine, and then later on when you're coming towards the end of your training you do actual specific training in general practice, and we run those courses as well. I think you need to have a lot of different skills to be a GP. First of all, you have to be really interested in people, because essentially you're meeting lots of different people of all ages every day. They come into you, for them it's often quite a big deal. They're very worried about some particular symptom that they have. So you need to be able to listen to them, to have very good communication skills to pick up what is exactly going on for them. But then you also have to actually be a good doctor and make sure that you don't miss anything serious. So we get lots of people presenting with lots of symptoms, but actually it's quite unusual for them to have anything that's too seriously wrong with them, luckily. But it really is our job to work out, you know, what could potentially be a serious illness and make sure that it's diagnosed and managed properly. I think if you're interested in doing medicine, I can highly recommend it. I've really enjoyed it as a career. It gives great opportunities really from the moment you qualify. You do also get an opportunity to travel and work in other different countries, and many of the people in my class have actually ended up living in other countries, and that's been interesting for them. It's a lifelong process. You go on learning throughout your life, you go on meeting new people. You want to be interested in people, is all I'd say. So if you think you're one of those kind of people, and you're also kind of interested in how things work and a bit of detective work, a bit of biology, then medicine might really be a great job for you.
Let's go to our second doctor, Professor Frank Murray. He's a consultant gastroenterologist in Beaumont Hospital. Let me explain to you what a gastroenterologist is. If you have a problem with your tummy, or with your bowel, or indeed with your liver, well, Frank is the person to look after you. Let's go and see what Frank does for a daily routine.
My name is Frank Murray. I am a consultant gastroenterologist here in Beaumont Hospital. I'm also a professor in RCSI, and I'm in addition president of the Royal College of Physicians of Ireland. My life as a gastroenterologist involves taking care of patients who've got intestinal and liver problems. They have a range of abnormalities and diseases, some of which are relatively mild and some of which are life-threatening and require intensive periods in hospital. Patients who've gotten liver failure, for instance, tend to be critically ill, and they have quite a high mortality. In other words, a large number of them die, whereas the outpatients that we look after have very high survival rates, and we have many treatments which we can give which make a huge difference to the quantity and quality of their lives. So in terms of the day-to-day work of a gastroenterologist, we've several different tasks we undertake. First of all, we perform a lot of endoscopy. By endoscopy I mean we insert endoscopes into people's intestinal tracts. For instance, if patients are bleeding, we will apply endoscopic therapies to stop bleeding. If patients have gallstones, we will perform sphincterotomy, or open up their bile ducts and take out stones. If they have tumours of their bile duct or their intestinal tract, we will put metallic stents through those tumours to drain them. We also take out polyps and other small to medium-sized growths within the colon and upper intestinal tract. When I was a trainee, we had very few treatments for liver disease, for instance. Now we have many, many sophisticated treatments that improve the quantity and quality of people's lives. Likewise, for inflammatory bowel disease, when I started training, we simply got steroids and 5 ASAs, which were very low level, but not very satisfactory immune suppressive medications. Now we've got a variety of highly potent drugs, many of which have come out of clinical and biological research, which allow us to control inflammatory bowel disease for far more patients and reduce the need for surgery in those patients. In fact, every 4 or 5 years, the way we manage many conditions changes very dramatically. So that's really exciting, and it's very exciting being part of all of that, as you can imagine. In terms of being a gastroenterologist, much of my life is spent doing things as opposed to seeing patients, both as in and outpatients. So I think you need to be technically adept in terms of performing endoscopy. It's not surgery, but it is nonetheless a skills-based, technical skills-based activity. So I think people need to be technically enthusiastic and able. Being a good communicator, being a leader on a team, being a member of a team, being a manager of resources are all really important as well. It's rewarding in the extreme to look after patients and their families, both in terms of helping improve the quantity and quality of their lives through the various procedures we perform and medications we give, but also in terms of showing care and concern for people. Not all of the patients we see we can cure, not all of the patients we see we can even treat, but I think we can always help to improve people's situations and the family of patients in these situations by caring and showing compassion. I would recommend medicine to people who feel that they want to be involved in a caring profession, who are prepared to work very hard, who are prepared to be innovative, be members of a team, be leaders of a team. I think it is perhaps the most rewarding career, and I myself feel I've been very, very fortunate to be a doctor.
Did you ever want to see a brain surgeon at work? They sound like terribly intelligent people. Well, let's go and meet Professor Kieran Bulger. He's a brain surgeon in Beaumont Hospital. Let's go over to theatre to see what Kieran does for a daily living.
So my name is Kieran Bulger. I'm a neurosurgeon, which means a brain surgeon. I'm Professor of Clinical Neuroscience in the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and I'm a consultant neurosurgeon in Beaumont Hospital in Dublin, which is the national neurosurgery unit for the whole country. So neurosurgery is to do with anything to do with operating on the brain or the nervous system. So it includes operating on the spine and operating sometimes on peripheral nerves as well. The main pathologies that we deal with, or main problems that we deal with, are patients with head injuries, patients who fall off their bikes, crash their motor cars, fall out of windows, patients who have brain tumours, and brain tumours are quite common. They can be primary tumours of the brain themselves, or they can be tumours that are secondary tumours. In other words, they've spread from somewhere else in the body. Another common condition we deal with would be people with brain hemorrhages, and there's all different types of brain hemorrhages. So a typical working day really depends on what's happening. So it really, you can divide it into days when you're on call, which means that you're the guy who's responsible for anything that happens around the country in terms of somebody with an emergency problem with their head. So if somebody crashes a car in Donegal and they get a head injury, then you're the guy that they're coming to in Beaumont. So that day is quite a hectic day, the day when you're on call, because you're getting phone calls from all over the country. You're dealing with people who've collapsed with brain hemorrhages, people who've had epileptic seizures, people who've, as I said, had head injuries. And so that day is a bit hectic. It's a bit not typical, nothing you can plan, it's what comes through the door. Then the days you're not on call, then you're either seeing patients in the clinic, so they've been patients who don't have emergency problems who've been sent in by their general practitioner, or you're operating. And the kind of operating you do on the day you're not on call is usually stuff that's not an emergency, but for most of the things we do, it's urgent. So it'd be people with brain tumours, people with spinal cord tumours, brain hemorrhages, that kind of thing. So the pressure is quite intense as a neurosurgeon. And the main reason for that is in most aspects of medicine, most people will do well. In other words, if you're dealing with people with appendicitis or gallbladders or whatever, most patients will do well. In neurosurgery, it's not so straightforward. It's not as many people do well. It's more difficult in terms of emotionally. You have to deal with some pretty sad cases. It's quite often young people who have brain tumours who aren't going to survive. And what you're trying to do is improve their function or help them have a better quality of life for the time they have left. So the patient we're going to do today, I can't be too specific, but basically she's a lady who collapsed and had an epileptic seizure. And at the hospital that she was brought to, they did a scan, and the scan identified that she has a tumour in her brain. So today we're going to try and remove the tumour without damaging her brain. For two reasons. Firstly, by taking out the tumour, we'll get some of the pressure off the brain, make more space for the brain itself, because the tumour is occupying space in the skull, and that's what caused her to collapse. And the second reason we want to achieve today is so that we can get tissue from the tumour that we can send off to a laboratory, and we can find out exactly what kind of tumour it is we're dealing with. At the end of the day, it's a very rewarding career, and it's a great education. You get a very broad education about a whole pile of different topics. It's interesting, and it's very rewarding in terms of what you can do for patients and what you can achieve in life. And so while it's tough, the rewards are worth it.
So breast cancer surgery is my special interest, and we've looked after over 2,000 patients now over the last decade. It's been a particularly exciting time in breast cancer because it's changed so much. When I started practice 15 years ago, this was a disease where there was a relatively poor outcome. And with the substantial improvements that we've made in less invasive surgery and in more sophisticated drugs and more specific targeted drugs, the outcomes have really substantially improved. We are making such progress with drug treatment, and we're being more selective as to who needs drugs. So we're reducing the amount of chemotherapy given and only giving it to those who need it. It sounds obvious, but we're only managing to do that with recent genetic testing that we've been able to do to make a more specific treatment plan for each individual patient. So we've a special interest in research in one particular area of breast cancer, looking at resistant to drugs in breast cancer, resistant to hormonal therapy, and trying to understand the pathways within the cell as to why that happens. So we've evolved a very sophisticated program where we're looking at the tissue from patients that we treat and trying to understand the biology of that and why certain drugs don't work after a period of time. We're already close to turning this into a chronic disease from being one that used to be a killer disease. So we're close, but not there yet. So a typical working day is I actually start by dropping my children to school. I then come to work here around 7:30 and then usually start teaching at 8. If it's an operating day, I'm in the theatre all day. If it's a non-operating day, it's either admin duty with the head of school or in the outpatients. Either way, it's very varied. The structure of the day depends. If you're in the operating theatre, that's an exciting day. I really like that because you're protected from the outside world. You can be uncontactable on your phone and just enjoy operating and doing what you do best. So the type of surgery I do, I still work as a general surgeon, which involves on-call duties and The type of surgery that comes from that would be gallbladder surgery or hernia surgery, but my main special interest is in breast cancer, and I do a lot of thyroid surgery as well. To be a surgeon, and particularly a breast cancer surgeon, I think you've got to have really good communication skills. I think you've got to have resilience and commitment. I think there are features of all surgeons that are helpful in your job. But I think most important is I think you've got to enjoy looking after patients. I think it's a very rewarding profession where you're helping others. So I've taken up the role of Head of School of Medicine over the last 2 years, and this is a particularly exciting area for me because one of the things I like to do is teaching. I love when you actually impart knowledge and help others to understand it. As a medical school, I think RCSI has a fantastic reputation around the world, and it's a real challenge to stay with the very best reputation. And something I want to do is to make sure that our medical school is right up there at the very top, not only in Ireland, but internationally. Medicine as a degree gives you an enormous number of options. Not only can you work in Ireland, but anywhere around the world. And there's a huge variety of things you can do. Working part-time, full-time. I think it's a well-respected profession, which I personally like. There's such excitement and such variety. There's so many different things you can do with a medical degree. I would certainly encourage people to consider it strongly. So there we have it. That's the final episode in this series of So You Want to Be a Doc. I hope by meeting the various healthcare professionals and doctors, it helps inform you about making a decision as to whether studying a career in medicine is for you. And finally, remember, if you've missed out on any of this or previous episodes of So You Want to Be a Doc, you can get them on the RCSI YouTube channel. Now, let's go to our live questions. Well, welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed that program with our 3 doctors, and thanks very much to Susan, Frank and Kieran for their efforts. And indeed, over the last 3 episodes we've had 10 different specialties shown to you, and I think you get a flavour of what it's like being a doctor, the wide variety of things that can be done in one's career. Now, thank you very much for all your questions. We've lots of them coming in. I'm going to just take a few of them to start with. We've got Kevin who comes from the Institute of Education down the road here in Leeson Street. Thank you for your very nice email, Kevin. You ask, how and when does a doctor begin lecturing in college? So what actually happens, Kevin, is after you graduate, 2 or 3 years into it, you may decide that you might take time out to lecture back to medical students, and that's really the career pathway. It's different for each specialty. Now here's a question for Celeste here, my colleague in admissions here in RCSI. Robert in Kilkenny asks via email, he says, what are the entrance requirements in relation to points and the subjects in the Leaving Cert? Difficult question. Celeste, do you want to try that one?
No, easy enough, Prof. Hill. Robert, what you need is Irish, English, Maths, a science subject and a 3rd language. They're the basic minimum entry criteria, plus HPAT. At RCSI, you probably have heard Prof. Hill explaining that we have a 5-year program and a 6-year program. So if you have chemistry and another lab science, you go straight into the 5-year program. So chemistry is the key if you're trying to get out of the 6 years of study. You also need HPAT, obviously, and you need to apply through the CAO. The points for last year were 729, so that was a combination of averaging 550 Leaving Cert points and about a 180 HPAT. Okay. So bringing it up to 729.
So they're the guides, 180 HPAT, 550 in your Leaving Cert. Approximately, that should put you in contention. Okay, look, we have a question here from Jean, who's watching all the way from France. So bonsoir, Jean. She's considering studying medicine in Ireland next year, and she says, she asks, what are the ways to become a scientist in research in the medical field after one has done a traditional medicine course? So that's a great question. Really, what happens is after you graduate, you become more specialised in scientific research, and you might take some time out and do research work in the lab. So a very small percentage of doctors do that. They become known as clinician scientists who make the breakthroughs in how we make a difference in medicine. So good question, Jean. Now, this is one from Jerry by email. This is a question for you, Celeste. Says, any advice on taking the HPAT? Difficult one. I'm sorry, you're getting all the hard ones.
No, HPAT, I mean, practice, 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 right? So no mystery about it anymore. So there's lots of resources available from the CAO website, from the ACER website, and from our own websites as well. So get your hands on those practice test booklets. There's about 4 available now. Students in TY and 5th year have already started practicing, so listen to Morning Ireland and be widely read. So
okay, so go to the HPAT website and do the practice ones and take it from there.
Yeah.
Okay, Bernadette from Dingle emailed in. Bernadette, thanks for your email. She says, was there any single moment where you realised that being a doctor was your calling? Was it before you began studying medicine or after it? I actually was very fortunate. Some of my family members did medicine. And I remember my sister once came home one day and she hated being involved in an operation of an appendectomy, and I actually loved it. I thought it was great, and I thought that's what I want to do. And from that moment, that's when I knew I wanted to be a surgeon. But everyone's different. I think the most important thing is that you enjoy what you do to get up in the morning, and I love it every day. So I think as long as you're happy in what you're doing, that's the most important thing. Aaron has another question here. He says, are students under too much pressure at college? Do you think that the years of college are too much or too little? Aaron, I think college life is a great time. Here in RCSI, we have over 70 clubs and societies. Students have a great time. Yes, there's pressure at exams. That's part of life. But boy, do they know how to party as well. So it's a work hard, play hard mentality, and that's throughout college. I'd love to go back and start college again. It's a great time. I've got a question here, and oh gosh, we've had lots of questions on that same theme. Orla and Porrick and John, is studying medicine any time for social life? They're all asking. Well, as I said to you, it's a work hard, play hard. They've all really enjoyed themselves here. So we as their teachers don't get to see all that side, but they really do enjoy themselves. Neve has sent in an email here. Neve says, can you train yourself not to crack under pressure of being a doctor? That's a different one, Neve. I think you learn to deal with a stressful environment. I mean, there's lots of stresses in your daily working life, and I think we train you in medical school to cope with those situations. So we prepare students, say, for breaking bad news. That's part of being a doctor. You got to communicate and break bad news. So we in our training in medical school here in RCSI will help you to avoid that situation. So it's very rare for a doctor to actually crack, as you call it, under pressure. Let's go on with other questions. Hanny from the Netherlands, we have a lot of Europeans here, asks on Facebook, what is Dublin like as a city to study in, and what's it like to work in hospitals over there? Well, the weather is, we don't have a lot of sunshine. We do in the summertime, but we've had a lot of flooding in the last while, but we don't get huge extremes. We don't get really, really cold weather here. So I like that kind of a mild climate. But you know, it's a great city. It's a very vibrant city, a lot of student life in the city, so it's a very safe city as well. I certainly, my family are growing up here and we feel very safe in it. So yes, come on over, Hanny from the Netherlands. Dermot has emailed in, and Dermot, I see you were at the RCSI Open Day earlier this month. He says the live surgery was cool, thank you very much. How do you perform the live surgeries, and do you need patient permission, and what if something goes wrong? Good question, Dermot. So in any patient you get their permission to do an operation, but we've been doing the live surgery now for over 10 years, and we actually get the patient specific permission. They sign that they're happy that other people watch, and they're doing that to give something back to society, to educate others, and it's a very, very gracious move of them to do that. What if something goes wrong? Same as in any surgery, we're trained to be prepared for that and deal with the situation. As you saw, we were very happy last week. There was no problem, but if it does, we're trained to cope with that situation. Now, here's another question. This is for you, Celeste. Okay. Back to you. Alison in Wexford asks on Facebook, medicine's a lot of points in the CEO. Are there any alternative routes to study at RCSI?
Okay, so I guess with the introduction of HPAT, the points have dropped significantly. So we do have some students coming in as low as 525. Now, bearing in mind low meaning not 525, I mean over 450 points is the top 20% in the country. So you're doing super well if you're getting over 450. But yeah, you can take a long-term goal and look towards graduate entry. We have 30 places for graduate entrance. So they need a 2-1 degree and a GAMSAT, which is like an aptitude test in the sciences. And also you could consider our mature entry pathway, and we have 15 places for mature entry. So 3 entry pathways: school leaver, mature entry, and graduate entry. 84 places in total. So all of that info is available on the web, and you can email us in for any detail.
So 84 Irish students in every year here in RCSI. Okay, Michelle via Twitter, how do you know which breast cancer patients to treat with drugs and which to treat with surgery? Michelle, we often treat patients with both surgery and drugs, and it's actually a multidisciplinary team to decide. So what we do is, you know, the radiologist, the surgeon, all specialists come together at a weekly meeting and decide what's the best care pathway for that patient. So that's the best outcome for the patient. They'll get the input of many, many specialists. So in deciding at drugs or surgery, It's often both, but the whole team will decide and then leave the final decision to the patient. Elizabeth in Galway emails, how far are we from a cure for breast cancer? Well, I hope we're not far off, but I think it's going to be a couple of years. We certainly are making major inroads into it, but I think it might be a number of years yet. But, you know, research discoveries happen and things can change overnight. So watch this space. I certainly hope we have it changed over the next few years. Here's an email from Shane. What about opportunities in sports medicine? Good question, Shane. A lot of interest in this area with the success of the Irish rugby team, the soccer team are in Europe. Sports medicine is an evolving discipline. It has certainly, over the last 5 years, become a much more focused specialism. It's after you graduate, you choose to do that. Many orthopedic surgeons branch off into that as a specialty. Steph on Facebook, what is the best thing about the Irish healthcare system? Yeah, that's a good question, Steph. We often hear a lot of bad things in the media, and that's really such a small percentage of what happens. We have a lot of really good things in Irish healthcare. We have a great screening program for various cancers. And when you get into the health system in Ireland, you get a really first-class service. You get really good doctors, good nurses, and appropriate resources and facilities compared to other countries. Unfortunately, in the media, we hear a lot of things that are less than perfect. That's usually about access to the system. And that's something that's going to take a number of years to fix. But the majority of the system, and to work in it, is very enjoyable. Okay, let's see what other questions we have in here. Mark in Dublin via Facebook asks, I want to become a GP. Does a GP need to know a lot about every illness, and do they need to experience time in hospital? Well, you remember seeing Susan on the video. Susan actually did train in hospital practice. You do need to train as a GP in hospitals for a small number of years just to get the idea of what actually goes on. So being a GP, competitive like all things, but very worthwhile. Evie asks, will the points increase this year? Well, I can't predict the future, Evie, but in general, I don't think they'll change too much unless something changes in the system. There's about 2,200 people showing interest in applying for medical school each year. And I think, as we said, the points about 180 on the HPAT and about 560 in the Leaving Cert should keep you in a safe target zone of getting a reasonable chance of getting into medical school. Okay, anonymous email coming in. When do students begin to see real patients? We here at RCSI, we start on day one, week one. We introduce you to real patients, and we actually work with real patients right throughout your training curriculum. We also do simulation. We have a state-of-the-art simulation center here in a new building that's going up. But we focus that, you know, real patients are what it's about. John by email says, why study at RCSI? Good question, John. Well, I think I'm obviously biased, but there's a lot of great teachers here in RCSI, city centre location, and I think when you get in, you'll find the really, really superb teaching program here. But more important, it's not just getting the degree. Once you graduate, you've got 25,000 alumni who are going to help you in your career, whatever specialty you choose. So I think there's a lot to be enjoyed here at RCSI, and we'd certainly welcome your interest in that. We have lots more questions here, but you know what we're going to do over the next 24 hours? We're going to reply to them on social media. We're going to finish this episode now of So You Want to Be a Doctor. It remains me to thank everybody involved in this series. It's been a real pleasure. We hope you enjoyed it. And remember, they're all available on the RCSI YouTube channel. We hope it's helped you make a decision whether you want to do medicine. Thank you very much for tuning in.